Okay, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. My name is Edward Tsipras, and I'm probably the least qualified person at this table to speak about media as the Undersecretary of State of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Latvia. However, I must admit that I have a sort of personal quest today to accomplish. And this is just to explain that my late father, during his youth, he was trained or he took his apprenticeship in a printing house of one of the newspapers, which allowed him, during all of his following life, to count himself as the media expert. So he had opinion on everything which has been printed or broadcasted, and older he grew, and with age approaching, he became probably another old grumpy man, and he always complained that there are no more journalists left around. Probably there are some merely reporters, most of them inaccurate ones. So I would say that my task today, and probably even more task of this panel and the following ones, would be to prove the opposite, that there are still journalists around, that we can do to improve the overall media environment, both in Europe and looking beyond in the area of the Eastern Partnership, to make true journalism to thrive and to provide us, readers and viewers, with objective and complete information on what is happening around. I must apologize that our envisaged moderator, Aidan White, who is director of Ethical Journalism Network, unfortunately was stranded in Frankfurt while changing his planes. So he will join us later this afternoon. But for a while I would like then a good colleague of mine, Viktor Makaros, who is currently advisor to the Minister of Foreign Affairs and also former media expert himself, then to moderate this panel and introduce speakers.
Thank you very much, Edward. Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This panel, which I'm really looking forward to listening to, is going to build upon what we already heard from the excellent opening session, but also those of you who attended yesterday's special event by the European Endowment for Democracy will find that we are going to touch upon the same issues here. This panel is about the media landscape in the Eastern Partnership countries, the trends and challenges that we see there. We're going to talk about different issues here. We are going to touch upon legal and regulatory issues, the policies, the policy environments in these countries. We will discuss what role the governments play and should play to create an open and pluralistic media environment. What's the role of the professional media in these environments? Probably the issues of internet and social media in this context will crop up. And from what I know from speaking to panelists, whom I will introduce in a second, such keywords as trust and truth are probably going to appear in the discussion quite a lot. Now, we have a really excellent group of panelists today. I would like to introduce them now. First of all, Boris Novosardan, who is the president of the Yerevan Press Club, which is the first independent association of journalists in Armenia. Boris is an expert on freedom of expression and freedom of information, and he has a journalistic career that is already more than 35 years long, and he is a lecturer and a teacher and a commentator on these issues. Our next speaker will be Oksana Romanuk from Ukraine, and Oksana is director of the Institute of Mass Information in Ukraine, and also is a key organizing member of the Stop Censorship movement, and I guess that says it all, what it is about. It's about protecting freedom of expression, also improving citizens' rights to information. Oksana will be followed by Tatiana Repkova, who is the founder of the Media Managers Club. And this is a global online sharing resource and a social network for news media management. And I understand what describes Tatiana's competence best is her book that is called New Times: Making a Professional Newspaper in an Emerging Democracy. And finally, Ethel Hallister, who is the communication and public diplomacy expert at the Estonian Center for Eastern Partnership, will share her insights on journalism and media in the Eastern Partnership region. Now, I'm really looking forward to the very interesting presentations here. However, we have to take note of the fact that the excellent first panel have taken a little bit of our time. We will not begrudge them that because of the excellent quality of their presentation, but this deficit will have to be answered by discipline, which means that we will have to contain our presentations within the 8 minutes limit. I will make sure that you're reminded of that. We will then have time for questions and a brief discussion, and we will have to conclude for the coffee break at 11:20 at the latest. So, without further ado, I would like to give the floor to Boris Novosardan, the president of the Yerevan Press Club. Please, Boris.
Thank you very much. For the balance and respecting the audience, I will show my slides in English, but I will speak in Russian. So please change your equipment if you need to listen translation from Russian into English. And I will check how this works. Okay, that's fine. So first of all,
First of all, I would like to thank the organizers of this first media conference, because in the very beginning of the initiative of Eastern Partnership, we haven't seen great attention to the problems of the media in the framework of this initiative, and it's very good, on one hand, that those challenges that manifested themselves during the Europeization of the countries of Eastern Partnership, and now I mean the geopolitical confrontation, we see what a great role is played by media component, and it's not an accident that it's exactly now that this first media conference was initiated for the Eastern Partnership. And I hope that the tradition to pay attention to media will continue. I would like to start with the fact that during last years, some organizations that take active part in a civil forum initiated a project that is called Media Landscape in Eastern Partnership, and many of those organizations are represented here. And this research that they conducted allowed us to determine progress or regress in media freedom, and the research itself was based on surveying experts in all the 6 countries of Eastern Partnership. And I will briefly tell you about the findings of this research, which you can find in more details in this booklet that are at the entrance. It's the second booklet in the framework of this project, and it fully represents the situation in all the 6 countries as far as I believe. This is a chart, a comparative chart that shows different indicators in the countries according to 4 to 5 components: policy, practices, broadcasting, internet, and overall ranking. So these are the main components that probably determine the dynamics of the situation in our countries. This is a separate component that represents this situation as a whole. This is also a comparative chart, and here you can see the dynamics during 2014 in all the 6 countries, where we see that the greatest progress happened in Ukraine in 2004, and then there is a decline in Azerbaijan, and of course, this can be perceived as a very conditional rating, but still it is based, as I have already said, on the data of leading experts in media of our countries. The main question that was raised in connection to that, and the main changes during that year in these countries, you can see the dynamics, is that Ukraine passed my country, Armenia, which was on the 3rd place before. There was a great breakthrough in Ukraine, and we have had a lot of discussions. How can it be that in the country where media are being closed and forbidden to broadcast, and journalists are of foreign countries are taken away their accreditation, arose questions, and I will answer this question a bit later, but now I will only show you the results of the research. In this chart, you see the situation in broadcasting. It's approximately the same as the overall situation. Here you can see the situation in the internet. Some changes are related to the fact that the situation is in Azerbaijan and Belarus is basically equalized, though according to other indicators Azerbaijan was higher. And finally, policy for media, and I will stop here because there are some comments that I would like to share. How these problems are represented and solved by our experts from the Eastern Partnership countries. This is a small font, but I will try to tell you in short what we mean. In Armenia, the main problem and the main task right now is to amend the law on TV and radio to address the independence of regulatory bodies and create a legal environment relevant to digital switch over. In Azerbaijan, our experts emphasize the importance of adoption of the law on defamation and cancellation of criminal prosecution of people who are active in media and who often are forced to pay or at least have this debt to pay, this demand to pay high amounts of compensations for moral damage.
As to Belarus, the main issue, according to our experts, are as follows: revision of the presidential decree on the regulation of the internet, and the principle of blacklisting for websites with restricted access. Elimination of actual state monopoly over the main media, and privatization in the field of media and creation of competitive media market is also important. As to Georgia, the main issue, according to our experts, is to overcome partisanship in media, meaning political influences on political impact on media. And in Georgia, we can see well-developed pluralism. However, political affiliations of media affect the general situation, the market, and we need to find out the ways to ensure pluralism and regulate, reform public broadcasting, improve regulations on transparency in media funding, and encourage politics-free investments in media. In Moldova, the main challenge is the insufficient transparency, which results in considerable control over media by politicians and oligarchs, and therefore it is required to regulate this situation by laws and regulations. As to Ukraine, there is a need to conduct privatization of communal media, which are still owned by these state organizations and structures. As to journalism practice, the situation is the same, and you can see the recommendations. For example, in Armenia, there is a need to exclude the avoidance of liability for those who restrict the activities of journalists. The same difficulties are also in Belarus, in Georgia. Public television should be addressed in Moldova press media, and Ukraine access to media is sometimes problematic. And to conclude, I would like to address the topic mentioned by previous speakers, a certain conflict between the freedom of information and informational security. This is the issue I meant when talking about situation in Ukraine. There are three main points to be emphasized in this respect. On one hand, we can see the misuse of information when we see propaganda instead of information, and the term informational security is often a pretext or a reason to restrict the freedom of speech and expression. And the list of Nemtsov, so-called, presented by Russian opposition to Europe and US, there is a demand to restrict journalists, close the access to these countries for those people who work in Russian media and do not abide by the principles of freedom of speech. Our colleagues from Eastern Partnership and the Slovak organization Memo 99 conducted a study which will be a nice addition to the report presented yesterday by European Endowment for Democracy. We presented the first findings, and we were told that the findings will be available online. We had different methods differing from the report, the survey of the European Endowment for Democracy, and we focused on the methods to protect the information. We can use this media entrusted by local citizens and the use of independent sources of information, and the priority of the access for media working in national languages to the sources of information and efficient work of national regulators. This table, I forgot to show you the slides. Yes, you can see the legitimate protection. This table shows the presence of these factors. You can see the best situation is in Georgia, although it was noted that there are some issues in the regions of Georgia, as they are not always engaged in the general environment. The worst information is in Belarus, where you can see it has 0 in this rating. Thank you for your attention. There are a lot of things to be added, and I may add them during the discussion. Thank you, Boris.
Speaker, just one remark. We are on the internet. This conference is online, so smile. We are also on Twitter. EAP Media is the hashtag, so do tweet your thoughts. Oksana Romaniuk is Executive Director of the Institute of Mass Information, which is a media watchdog and journalist rights organization. Oksana, the floor is yours, please.
Hello. So, during the last year, we have seen how information can be turned into a weapon, how information can start a war. And we had to learn how to quickly respond to that situation. I will try now to explain some ways that we used, and maybe these ways will be useful for the region as well. First of all, a little bit about the situation at the media market in Ukraine. Actually, we had real rise in journalism standards last year. At this time, there was really very good journalism standards, maybe like by 30%. By now, the situation has changed to a worse direction because of the concentration and manipulation of ownership of traditional media, which belong to oligarchs, to politicians, and which use this media as their privilege. There are wars between them for those influence, and all of this, along with Russian propaganda, undermines the trust to media in Ukraine. We saw a real fall in trust to media during the last year. And it's interesting that people, people were confused by very different pictures they got. We still have a really big influence of Russian capital Gazprom-financed media in Ukraine, which broadcast in Ukrainian language, like yesterday it was remarked by our Georgian colleagues. They have the same problem. And because of this very confusing picture, there appears a phenomenon of relativism. Yes, everybody lies, a lot of conspirology, the fall in trust to central media. At the same time, there was a rise in trust to local media. Well, local media needs a lot of support, in my opinion, in their standards, from financial point of view, and so on. There was also a rise in trust to digital non-profit journalism. I mean, such initiatives like Stop Fake, like initiatives of our colleagues who had to move from Donetsk and Luhansk regions, and they had to start some new media with support from crowdfunding or grants, and they are really independent, they are small, they are very individual, and people trust them. Another point which can be a solution in this case is the building of public service broadcasting. This year we had passed very important reform, amendments to the law on public service broadcasting, which allows us to finally build it in Ukraine, and a lot of forces are now focused on building it. The next point, the next step for us will be building the transparency of media ownership, which also undermines the trust. Well, we have also promote self-regulation because it's like it also helps the trust. At the same time, there is economical crisis, and the advertising market shrank by 33% during the last year, which makes journalists even more dependent on the will of media owners, which also hits the way they report, because they have to somehow follow the will of those owners. We have also observed the rise in trust to individual journalists, who maybe they even more trusted than traditional media, because they are like individuals. Maybe this is the influence of social networks, when even traditional media started to make reports from the point of individual person. When they make a report, for instance, from Donbass, they say, I went to Donbass, I hit my knee when I descended from a train. It really gets more trust. It's a kind of infotainment, how you call it. Yesterday, speakers mentioned that Russian media influence using emotions. And there are two ways actually to respond it. First way is, of course, follow journalism standards, abstain from emotions. The second way is to make maybe some smart ways like game news, infographics, videos, like which can be downloaded from mobile quickly. Speaking about the other situation with freedom of speech, yes, we had a big rise on the mainland, how to call Ukraine. The situation really changed to better. Yes, there were killings of journalists, like last year there was killed journalist Veremy, but his case was investigated indeed. The problem was the court. The court let go on bail those people who were guilty, and they are now on wanted list. The same with the murder of Buzina. I know that his case is already almost investigated till the end, and the conclusions, they plan to present conclusions in the nearest time. We have very bad situation really close in space in the Crimea and in the east. In Crimea, since April 1, Roskomnadzor did not support registration of over 1,000 local media. Their journalist cards turned into pumpkin, like in Cinderella tale, and they have no job now. They have no access to official buildings. One journalist is held in prison in Crimea. He was arrested on April 21. And well, there is a real informational vacuum because there are no Ukrainian journalists, no foreign journalists, there are even no Russian journalists. And local journalists have no access to official events because they do not have accreditation anymore. Only one Crimean Tatar language newspaper remained there. All the other Crimean Tatar language media were killed. As for the eastern Ukraine, right now we have one hostage who is held in Lugansk People Republic, how they call it. It is journalist Maria Varfolomeeva. She was captured in January for taking photo on the street, and she was sentenced to 15 years in jail. And I would like to turn attention to this issue. What we need to do in this situation? Well, first of all, it's of course reforms that should not be only on paper, but also implemented into practice. We have passed really important reforms during the last year. Second, I believe that we should coordinate our efforts in opposing Russian informational war together with countries of the Eastern Europe, because not to be regarded as like actions in response to Russian using the same means. But we should invent smart ways. We should openly tell that it is xenophobia, that it is hate speech, that it is violation of human rights, and we should look for common decisions for this. And of course there should be better education for journalists, better education for consumers of information, and there should be support for local media, for digital non-profit journalism initiatives, and for individual media, for individual journalists in Ukraine. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Oksana, for these suggestions. I'll just say that at the very end of the session, I'll ask each of the speakers to give a very brief, 30-second, perhaps list of ideas and recommendations what to do. But thank you very much for already sharing your insights. We'll come back to them later again. Now I give the floor to Tatiana Petkova, founder of the Media Managers Club. Please, Tatiana.
Good morning. It's good to be here. In my presentation, I would like to focus on the factors In my presentation, I would like to focus on the factors impacting on the development of professional media, and not only in the Eastern Partnership countries. Here I have distinguished the 5 major groups of factors and categorized them in accordance with my favorite SWOT analysis. There is only one group of internal factors which we journalists can manage directly and thus make them our strengths or weaknesses. It's journalism skills and expertise and professional media management. All external factors exist and influence the media regardless the media's activity or inactivity. We can either exploit them as opportunities or try to eliminate them as threats. Only the first 2 groups of external factors, democratization and digital media revolution, can be either an opportunity or threat. Propaganda, disinformation, information war, and war in Donbass, they all, from the point of view of professional media management, are always a threat, just like a kind of unfair competition. Instead of going to further details about the 5 groups of factors, let me focus on what they all have in common. They all have to deal with truth, and they do so in various ways. In the early 1990s, when I was the editor and publisher of the first Slovak business weekly Trend, one of my business co-partners told me during a debate, "You have your truth, we have our truth." Since then, I have been scrutinizing carefully what the truth actually is, and can seeking the truth be a universal guiding principle of journalism? Judging by principles of logic, any given proposition or statement can be labeled either true or false. But truth is also a philosophical category. There are as many truths as people. Which one is the absolute truth? The God's truth. Which God? Christian, Hindu, Muslim, another one? Therefore, in journalistic practice, a truth should be perceived rather as precision of facts. But is it? Here are some recent quotes about truth in journalism. There are 2 types of truth. One is moral truth, and the other one is legalistic truth. Working for a tabloid is not about telling the moral truth, but to give the best possible account that you are able to give in a situation by sticking to the legal truth as much as possible, but leaving out the inconvenient truth. Now, we could belittle this idea about moral versus legal truth by pointing out that Richard Pepiot is an ex-journalist, moreover from a tabloid newspaper where he was producing fictional stories about celebrities, as he himself admitted. Here is an active journalist, Martin Šimečka, editor at the well-respected Czech weekly Respect, several weeks ago. Never before have I experienced such a feeling of futility of the struggle for truth, which is visible to the naked eye, and yet so many people do not see it. And I do not mean the ideological truth, but the simple one, which can be verified by just using common sense. And here's one of the guiding principles of journalism as defined by the well-respected Pew Research Center in the United States. Journalism does not pursue truth in an absolute or philosophical sense, but it can and must pursue it in a practical sense. So, instead of finding the unconditional support for the truth perceived as precision of facts, I have found plenty of quotes about variety of truths. It did not take any deep research to compile this list, and I guess it could be much longer. It's us, journalists, who juggle with truth. How can we expect that our audience always perfectly understands which kind of truth we are seeking and talking about? And how can we expect that our audience and the public at large will not fall for Margarita Simonian, the editor-in-chief of the state-funded TV news network Russia Today, who contends there is no objectivity, only approximations of the truth by as many different voices as possible. Using the word truth across nations and cultures leads to Babylon. Nowadays, the Babylon is more confusing than ever due to at least 3 more factors: information explosion and information overload, the fact that everybody can be a journalist, and propaganda, disinformation, and information war. The idea that there are multiple interpretations of the truth has become the founding philosophy of state disinformation in Putin's Russia, designed to confuse those who would seek out the truth with multiple expressions of distracting PR chaff. So replying to the pro-Kremlin media narratives about the truth by more narratives about the truth from the other side means only to contribute to the growing confusion. Professional journalism does not need the labels of truth or objectivity. If it is factual, it is also truthful. If it is complete, it is also as objective as possible. Professional journalism may be the best counter-propaganda. However, there are no simple answers to real-life situations. Yes, readers do not always want an independent voice. Galina Timchenko, former editor-in-chief of the popular Moscow-based news site Lenta, moved to Latvia and set up the news site Meduza at the end of last year. Galina should be here in this room now, at least according to the list of participants. Is she here? Unfortunately not. So by covering Russia news from a base outside the country, Meduza journalists expected to be able to report the news professionally and without interference. However, in a recent interview, Galina said that much of the audience would like to see Meduza as freedom fighters rather than journalists. Attempting to remain neutral in a region split by political extremes, Meduza has been criticized by all sides. Our Russian readers have been known to scold us for calling the fighters in the Donetsk Republic separatists, as opposed to rebels or militiamen. Ukrainian readers, on the other hand, wish that we'd called them militants or terrorists. Sometimes even stating a last name in the headline, such as Navalny or Khodorkovsky, leads some readers to believe that we support them if we choose to write about them. And another enigma for professional journalists: how to establish professional balance in covering the war in Donbass. Several issues have been recently raised in Media Managers Club by Sergei Gus, editor of the weekly Our Reporter in Dnipro-Dzerzhinsk. If publishing a point of view of a representative of the so-called Donetsk People's Republic, our secret services could qualify it as a separatist propaganda. Many readers, relatively pro-Ukrainians, do not like stories that criticize the army or volunteer fighters. Federalism ended up as the category of dangerous topics. Not even talking about the articles of how military commissariats are used for political persecution. After publishing one of such articles in Our Reporter, a military commissariat submitted material to the police for criminal prosecution of Sergei himself. So remaining silent about all these topics is also impossible, even in conditions of actual censorship, Sergei concludes. And I hope to hear some ideas today about what Sergei and other journalists out there could do and should do. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Tatiana, for this wonderful excursion into the theory and philosophy of the word truth, but also in a way that is very topical and very close to the reality we live in. Our final speaker is Ertul Halliste, who is a communication expert at the Estonian Center of Eastern Partnership and obviously has a lot of expertise in the Eastern Partnership media issues. Ertul, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Am I audible? Yes? Lovely to be here and share ideas with such distinguished colleagues at all the panels, but at the same time I see so many familiar faces here in the hall or audience with whom we have already worked and continue to do so. So I really thank the Latvian presidency for inviting Estonian Center of Eastern Partnership as a panelist. These days it is horribly hard to attract attention, so I'm going to make things a little bit topsy-turvy and draw attention to another aspect, how media and journalists can be helped. Yesterday, our colleagues from the European Endowment for Democracy presented initial findings of a feasibility study on Russian language media initiatives in Eastern Partnership and beyond, and the executive director of the EED, Jerzy Pomianovsky, titled his article in EU Observer, "Russian speakers deserve good journalism, not counter-propaganda." One cannot agree more with this statement. I would only like to expand this statement to all media consumers. Everybody who watches television, everybody who listens to radio, everybody who reads papers anywhere in any language deserves a quality product. Now, how to achieve this quality product? I'm quite sure that my colleagues already have drawn attention to bigger issues like media environment, legal issues, and so on and so forth. I would like to speak about very practical and concrete things that can be done on the basis of our work at the center, because devil is very often in the details or small things. Let me bring into the picture another study. This time it is made by our center, and it is called EU-related communication in Eastern Partnership countries. Why this study came to being is that we Estonians are very practical, or at least we like to think that we are practical people, and we always take bull by the horn. So we initiated 17 months ago a comprehensive training program for all 6 partner countries, and this consisted of multilateral events, bilateral events, and study visits to Estonia. And our main aim was to bring together journalists, public communicators, and civil society representatives, because we firmly believe that united efforts will bring better results. So, and we finished this first phase of our training program with a high-level seminar in Brussels 3 weeks ago, where we added one more partner to the table, and this time it was the representatives of EU institutions. So, and after conducting all this, we started to think that we have quite a number of good ideas that can be presented as recommendations for the further work. So we made this study. It's based on 3 pillars: needs assessment, feedback from all our participants, and field work, because we have been on the ground quite a lot. So here are some of the recommendations, and first finding and then recommendation. And Oksana already mentioned trust. Yes, we believe that trust between journalists and public communicators is of utmost importance. We see in the partner countries that there is mistrust. From one side, the communicators think that journalists are stupid, sorry, we don't think so, or they are critical if they criticize the government, and this is part of the free media. On the second hand, the public communicators are not well informed of the subjects they are supposed to communicate. They are often late in the responses. So both sides have some truth in their statements, but we should build trust among each other, because working together again will be the way forward. Why not to have off the record briefings? Let's try to help journalists. We want to help journalists to know the subjects far better. Secondly, treating media equally is not in all countries media is treated equally. The pro-government media is more favored than those who are pro-opposition, for example. Our firm belief at the Eastern Partnership Center is that all media should be treated equally, and public communicators can work with any media. I'm glad that Oksana again mentioned regional journalists. They are a gold mine. Very often we see that regional journalists are neglected, and this is not the way to go, because they do have people's trust. Our finding is that they do have people's trust because they speak about things which are very important to people, and they should be involved in any kind of initiatives. And they should be trained and offered information and in their mother tongue. But I'll come to languages a little bit later. Using topic-based approach rather than event-driven communication, very often that we see in the partner countries that all the official communication is built around some kind of official visits. These are boring, and we quite understand that journalists don't want to cover this, but if you have a topic-based communication, you explain what the government is doing, why the reforms are needed, what are the benefits, then there will be many, many great stories to tell also for journalists. And last but not least, language. And here we have two approaches. First, what we have discovered is that the knowledge of foreign languages is still not sufficient among the journalists of Eastern Partnership countries. And this puts them in a very bad situation, because they can get information only from the sources that are in their mother tongue and then the language of the neighbor of EU's neighbors. So this leaves them in the information flow of Russian media outlets or Russian official sources, whereas they can't read EU official materials, and then they don't have enough information. So this is one point. I believe that EU institutions can come and help with finances to organize language trainings for journalists in the Eastern Partnership. And secondly, this is a critique toward public communicators and a little bit toward journalists. Very often EU speak is used and nobody takes the trouble to translate agricultural facility into greenhouse. And this should be done all the time. And I would like to enforce my last statement with a quote from A.A. Milne's Winnie the Pooh. It is more fun to talk with someone who doesn't use long, difficult words, but rather short, easy words like, what about lunch? We have some time to the lunch and we will have discussion and coffee after later. But this is our firm belief again that everything can be translated into human language. Estonia is an e-country. We have nothing on the paper. I believe it's criminally punishable. In Estonia, if you carry big and heavy paper materials with you, our study, which has much more recommendations, findings and recommendations, is available at our website. So find us in the internet, find our Facebook, read our study. We firmly believe that united efforts will lead to the results. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Haliste. Now, before we go to the questions and answers and discussion, just to give you a very boiled down recap on what we have discussed, so that the first speakers are not exactly forgotten, because there are lots of interesting issues that were touched upon. Boris talked about the situation in the Eastern Partnership in general, where according to his research, the progress and the change is very uneven, and the issues that were raised are about legislation, regulation, about protecting journalists from persecution. It was about internet access, the state monopoly on media in some cases. It was about partisanship and politicization of media ownership, transparency. Oksana Romanuk took over, focusing on such tragic challenges as killings of journalists, the dire situation of the journalists in the Crimea. At the same time, the important things to focus on that were mentioned: local support for local media, the importance of digital non-profits, the social networks, the special role of the public service broadcasters. Tatiana Repkova discussed the concept of truth and fact, and from what I get, the actual parameters to focus on are perhaps somewhat different, such as factuality, completeness, honesty and fairness of reporting. And there are some extremely difficult challenges facing the journalists in covering conflicts. So there are lots of things to think of. And Ertel, as the last speaker, was focusing on the very practical aspects of building trust between journalists and communicators, about treating all media equally, about, again, focusing on the needs and the potential of the regional journalists, and the importance of language, where human needs is the language that we all should strive to speak. It is time to take some questions, and I will try to take them in batches of 3. So the lady over there in a white jacket, then the person, I'm sorry, I can't see exactly from here, again a lady from the top row, and there was one person here. Please.
Thank you very much, Chair, for the very interesting and inspirational panel. My name is Ratka Bečeva. I'm a Senior Project Manager at the European Broadcasting Union. I was pleased to hear that the importance of building of strong and credible public service media was raised by most of the panelists. And my question is, where do you see the major challenges for in the transformation from national broadcasters to public service media in the countries, in the Eastern Partnership countries? Thank you.
Let's take the next question over there.
Спасибо, здравствуйте.
Thank you. Good morning. I don't have a question, but as I am here, I'd like to comment. I'm Gayane Rustame. I'm a freelance journalist from Armenia. And this is not my choice. I was forced by these circumstances to work as a freelance journalist. I started working as a journalist in 1987 when the Soviet Union was about to collapse, and we started working to ensure this freedom of speech. And now we face a regress in Armenia, as the journalists who specialized, who started working in this field many years ago, they turned out to be marginals. I've been listening to the opinions about issues in journalism in Eastern Partnership countries, and I've been constantly thinking about this fact. Well, we are stating the facts we need to do. If we talk about Azerbaijan, where journalists are killed and put in jail, the situation in Armenia is latent, and journalists are pushed away. And I would like to express my idea. I've been listening to a speaker from Ukraine yesterday who, well, I was in despair because when there is this constant Russian propaganda in Armenia and Russian-speaking propaganda, because we listen to Vesti and we are brainwashed, according to Goebbels. I do apologize. Can you get to the point? Yes, I'll try to. What I want to say is that alternative media are very necessary in Armenia. I do not want to hurt these small websites and media that are this like dispersed light. But we do need alternative media as the only source of funding, of financing for establishing and creating these media are grants. I don't know how to do that, and I don't know who you will allow to work in Armenia as independent media, but please remember this. Thank you. So maybe we will consider it as a question.
A question over here, please. And we'll take the next questions in the next round.
Tamar Kinzurashvili Media Development Fund. Yesterday and today, several speakers mentioned the need to increase media transparency. Can we speak about development of common standards to detect and scrutinize ownership issues in the Eastern Partnership countries in order to inform public about particular interests behind the not only Russian media outlets but local ones repeating the same narrative as Russian propaganda and Russian media outlets do? Thanks.
Thank you very much. We have three questions that were addressed, I guess, to all of the panelists who wish to comment on that, about the role of the public service broadcasters and challenges, about the regress in some countries and the need for alternative media, and also the issue of financing of those and grants and so on. And finally, about media transparency, can we have common standards? Who would like to be the first to comment? Oksana, please.
So we are now in process of creating this public broadcasting in Ukraine. We believe that it is very important because we hope that the quality of the news, which will cover 90% of the territory, will inevitably influence the quality of all other news sources in Ukraine in the to a better way. What challenges we have now? First challenge is, of course, organizational, because there are some 7,700 people employed right now. It is a very obsolete Soviet times structure which should be reformed, and I know that there are over 10 proposals of new structures that should be formed on basis of this obsolete Soviet time structure. There have been created 9 working groups in which my colleagues and we also participate, and these working groups, they work on different issues from public communication, advertising, to structure, to employment, to news, and so on. Already this channel proposes very high-level news, and they propose really very interesting programs, open discussions. Of course, it will not compete with those channels which propose entertainment shows, like who has a better voice. Of course, it's no commercial competition possible. But as for news, we believe that it will compete. We can look at the example of, for instance, Poland, when there are some social changes, when there are elections, public broadcaster is on the top of the rating. When there is some calm situation, it's like on the 7th, on the 8th place. And speaking about the media transparency system, I think it's very important also to raise question of media transparency at the local level. We plan to launch 4 investigations at the local level because, yes, previously, even previous year, we focused a lot at the all national broadcasters, which is of course important, but we really paid very little attention to local media, which also belong to local businessmen who promote their own views, and the quality of journalism there is really very low, and it should be solved in a better way. There are some decisions, for instance, again, a decision from Poland, which I know they created a club for instance, press publishers. Inside this community, they disclose real circulation of their newspapers. For instance, in Ukraine, they post some figures of circulation that they have nothing in common with reality. This, of course, hits advertising market a lot. There are a lot of problems, monopolies, and when they disclose real circulation, even inside this club, it will improve advertising market, and it will improve the standing of independent sources of information, because it will liberalize the market. Another step, of course, is to introduce media transparency by laws and by political will to carry out demonopolization of media market, and to introduce a ban on ownership of media by state officials, especially high-ranking state officials. Because, for instance, in our country, president is the owner of TV Pятый Канал. Of course, it hits the trust to media and, well, even to the news. Thank you.
Thank you. Oksana, Boris, would you like to comment as well?
Thank all for the questions. The first about the challenges with the transition to public broadcasting. I think 2 main factors are here that are preventing development of public service broadcasting in all Eastern Partnership countries. First, it is there is no immunity against partisanship, and second, editorial independence is not ensured. So the legal and the regulatory mechanism, first of all, have to be developed to avoid those 2 challenges for public broadcasting almost in all Eastern Partnership countries. The second question about alternative media in Armenia, I'm always in favor of a natural development of media industry. Although, of course, in the situation in which our countries, and specifically Armenia, are finding themselves, I think some promotion initiatives are necessary. And yesterday we heard about the idea of basket fund for the media that could fill up the gaps that exist in the media markets of our countries. And in Armenia, we had this idea on national level yet in maybe 15 years ago, the idea of public service media fund, where public service did not mean the legal status of the media, but the mission of the media that should be supported. So probably accumulation of resources that could support the initiatives of creating a really alternative media that does not exist in the markets of our countries. I think this could be a temporary solution. But of course, never a selection of just one media that would be an alternative is not possible, because that media can be only public broadcasting, but this is already referring to the first question. And the third, and this is different issues. And the third question was about transparency of ownership. Indeed, this is a problem everywhere. And again, here we should not try to resolve the issue by direct methods. It should be, first of all, independent regulator, which will follow the whole path of how the investment is made to this or that media before providing licenses if it comes to the broadcast media. And a second principle that have to be adopted, commercial secret principle, despite the fact that media is business, should not be applied for the issues connected with the possibility to find final beneficiary. So this is still not well understood and well accepted in many countries. But this is the only way where we can ensure transparency of ownership. Thank you.
Thank you, Boris. Unless the other speakers have something to add to this, we can take the next round of questions. There was yes, the lady in the third row is first, then over there, right behind, and then the gentleman in the second.
Milica Pešić, Media Diversity Institute, London. I have 3 questions. The third one is probably for another session. The first question is, Boris talked about a regional study. We heard yesterday one study was done by the EED. I heard this morning there was a study regional about media done last year from our colleagues from Moldova. Are these 3 different studies? Do we need 3 studies? One question. Second question is, maybe this is not a question for you, but if everyone is talking about balanced journalism, for balanced fairness, you know, you have to have minimum 2 sides. If we are talking about Russian propaganda, I checked the list of the invitees, not a single person from Russia. You cannot have a dialogue or learn how it is to be a journalist in Russia if you don't hear from our colleagues from Russia, even though we obviously all hate Putin. But these are our colleagues. And the third question is for the third session, probably, can pan-regional television be some kind of solution, Boris? And then can pan-regional media literacy kind of thing, like Ukrainian stop fake news, regional in Russian language, be a solution to educate people about propaganda? Thank you.
Thank you. The next question, right over there, please. And please make the questions and comments very brief because we are running short of time. And
Ayaz Mirzayev from Azerbaijan journalist, and that's pity we started participation in this even very bad after the very bad news from Azerbaijan. You know, yesterday more than 16 people died in fire action in human house, but the main issue I think I am sure that the main issue and main question in all of our participants, our delegation, in his mind, if there are any standards about journalists who try to promote separatism in European Union, if there are any standards, because I heard and I watched a speech of Mr. Commissioner of Neil Muzinski, and he tried to criticize about the journalists who got prison that he promote separatism in Azerbaijan, but he tried to criticize journalists in Donbass, in other places of Ukraine who promote separatism too. Why? In this case, he tried to protect, but in another case, he tried to criticize. But we try to know that if there are any standards about journalists who try to promote separatism in European Union. That's a question.
Thank you. And the last question this time in the second over there. Yes, please, if you... Please.
Just very briefly, I wanted to tell you that we are talking so much. I'm Andrzej Krajewski from Poland. We are talking so much about Russian propaganda, TV propaganda, there is a piece of monitoring done 1 month, watching 8 TV channels, Russian TV channels, and the results are being put over there during the break. What is in there you can imagine, but it's better to read about it and see. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a question about the study. So how many do we need? Well, we all know we like them. We have a question about regional television, and we have a question about standards for promotion of separatism. I have not forgotten the question about inviting Russian participants. Maybe on behalf of the organizers, I would allow myself a very brief comment. This is an EU Eastern Partnership conference. It is perfectly understandable that the Russian media and the Russian journalists in reality are very much part of what happens on the ground, but from the very practical point of view, when you organize an event, you have to set certain boundaries, and this time I guess the boundaries were set the way they are. That does not preclude dialogue, I think, in the future that involves other parties in a more direct way, but that's something that has to be discussed in other contexts and in other fora. Please, Boris, would you start, perhaps?
Yeah. Thank you, Melissa, for the questions, very important ones. First, about different studies. Since the challenge is quite fresh, it is, I think, natural that different players and different institutions try to tackle it, try to address it. But I have to say that at least certain coordination existed between the research which was mentioned by myself and also Mr. Krajewski's, and thank you for reminding about the executive summary of the report, because the report is very much big, and indeed you can find it in the websites of our organization as well as Civil Society Forum. This research and research conducted by EED were quite well coordinated because the methodology were different. We were more our research was mostly based on the content of the TV channel. It was monitoring of specific programming during March, while, as you know, EED was focused on having and analyzing different researches, different studies, and they used also some results of our research as well. So it was rather enriching each other than providing the same alternative content. About regional TV, also important question, and again I will share my principle that the less artificial involvement in the media industry we have, the better. So I think if we are talking about alternative content for our region, which could somehow balance Russian propaganda, then I would say that using existing opportunities, existing media is very much important. And as such, I first of all consider Dost TV channel, which is not accessible in many of our countries, or the accessibility is very limited. So allowing Dost to be at least in all cable packages in our countries through some kind of support, maybe financial even support, because you know Dost is selling its products. It's the only way that this TV company exists. And also helping Dost to have local contributors from the Eastern Partnership countries, because again, because of financial difficulties, they do not have their correspondence journalists in many places. So this kind of support to Dost could maybe resolve the problem of regional TV. And a very brief answer on the question about promotion or propaganda of separatism. First of all, please accept my condolences about the tragedy that happened in Baku. And I saw already the pictures where renovating of that building is taking place. I think it's very timely initiative, although many people suffered. But I mean, there are a lot of ideologies that exist in this world. And I mean, separatism got very negative connotation because it is somehow compared with terrorism, with extremism and things like that. But by itself, it's a very neutral term. And if it is not accompanied by xenophobia, propaganda of war, propaganda of terror, I think this is not something that has to be anyhow restricted to appear in the media content. So it is rather to think about general issues, general ideas that have to be restricted in the media. Again, propaganda or discrimination and xenophobia. If this or that ideology are free of those, then it has to be all opportunities to be spread through media as well.
Thank you. Do other panelists have anything to add to that? If not, we can take three very, very brief questions and very, very brief answers. One question over there. I see a lady on the second row, I guess.
Hello, I don't have a question, just a piece of information. I'm from the Council of Europe Media Division. And I'd like just to inform you that the Council of Europe has very precise standard on media pluralism, media ownership, and media transparency. So in our activities, we can be inspired by this. And also to inform you that the Council of Europe, thanks to the funds of the European Commission, will have the projects in the region. We will have the specific projects based on the country-specific needs and also the regional ones. So I will be very happy to discuss with you on very, very concrete steps concerning our common activities. Thank you.
Thank you. Over there, please.
Hello. Ekat Kashelashvili, Georgian Institute for Strategic Studies. I'll try to be very brief with my question. Very good comments and questions about the ownership-related issues, but then I think that we need to be looking further than that. We have to be speaking about the actual financial independence of the companies, which are the business companies, basically. How sustainable they are. So when we speak about the owners, are they donors to those companies, or they are owners as the business owners of them who are profiting as from the businesses from those companies? And with that regard, how the regulatory environment actually encourages financial sustainability and independence of editorial policies with that for the media companies rather than restricts that. And in that sense, we have the new emerging trend in Georgia where implementation of association agreement has been attempted to be used basically for circumscribing it, narrowing down financial independence of the private media companies, and then rather than encouraging the vice versa development for that matter. We have the new draconian regulations for advertisement and sponsorship in the country that has been adopted with unprecedented speed, which left no time for reaction to the media companies even in a proper sense. So what we have as a result is something that especially small companies could be damaged out of that in terms of having lack of the financial income. The main aim of the new regulations was to target the biggest media company in Georgia, which is critical to the government. So they will be damaged as well, obviously. But as a result, we will have shrinked media market in the country, less resilience to the aggressive growth of the Russian media outlets in the country, and we already see that in Georgia with the recent polls that NDI came up with, 20% of the Georgian population trusts and watches Russian media as the primary source of information. So even in the countries where we see that the pluralism is in a better shape, it's very fragile. So my question is how the EU or Eastern Partnership platforms can be more attentive to early signs of the negative developments in the countries that are thought to be in the better shape. Because we haven't heard, frankly, anything, either from OSCE or Council of Europe, from EU, very limited reaction to what happened. And it's at the early signs where something can be done, actually, to maintain the media freedoms and encourage that, rather than just to speak in the situations when, frankly, nothing or very little can be done because it's already so bad.
Thank you. Thank you for your question. We'll take the last question and nothing on this side. So I see a question up at the very top row, please.
Аршалуис Мгдасян, я из Армении.
I represent the leading press club in Yerevan, Armenia. I do support the proposal regarding participation of Russian representatives, because we gather here in order to discuss the situation in our regions, but it turned out that this is the fault of Russian propaganda. Of course, they are to blame, but I'd like to ask a question. Do our experts think that the alternative sources they want to support and they may be involved or may become a part of this brewing informational war, considering current geopolitical interests? So there is this fear, and what is being done in order to avoid this process? Thank you.
Спасибо. So we have had the last round of questions, and perhaps we could start with Oksana, but please be very brief because we'll have to.
Okay, I will be very brief. I will just remind everybody that yesterday there was a panel with participation of Galina Timchenko, who heads Meduza and who previously headed Lenta.ru. She had to leave Russia. Obviously, she could give perfect insight in this local situation. I also do not think that representatives of vertical censorship structure could give some insight in the situation, which will have something common in reality. But for instance, in Ukraine, and I'm pretty sure that here in Baltic countries there are a lot of Russian journalists now who had to flee from the country, and there are a lot of Russian journalists who work, for instance, in the center of Kiev. There are RIA Novosti office, there is ITR-TASS office, there are a lot of other journalists, so they are present in our space. And I wanted to point out that it is very important that for the first time there appeared investigations and expert conclusions what is Russian informational war. This is for the first time I have seen this independent expert conclusion yesterday from EED, and it was done by independent experts, which is very valuable. The challenge is not only for us, the challenge is also for international media organizations, for international structures who have to look maybe for new solutions. This is an absolutely new situation, and I believe that even more investigations, more research is necessary to assess this problem and to assess this new challenge, to understand what to do with that. Because it's not only about fake news or xenophobia, it's also about some manipulations and, you know, how you said promotion separatism, how it is acceptable, what to do with this, what is the response. We carried out a survey among prominent independent international media like Associated Press, AFP, Radio Liberty and others. We asked them, how do you report on this situation? And we plan to issue these results, and yes, there is a big confusion actually how to act in this situation, and I think this is a challenge for many organizations, not only for countries.
Thank you, Oksana. I understand that Etel has something to say, but please be very brief.
Yes, I would like to address the concerns of our Georgian colleagues and give some food for thought. Media is a business, and this is a fact. And if we look at the high-quality media outlets like Financial Times or New York Times, then these are read by very few people, and New York Times, it has been in minuses ever since it was established 150 years ago. So this is one thing. And secondly, for a small country perhaps you have too much media, and this is again omnipresent in all Eastern Partnership countries. And in Estonia at the 90s we had a lot of media, many newspapers. They appeared like mushrooms after slight rain. We had more TV channels. Now we have only 3 TV stations, and we'll have and this is public broadcaster who has more channels, only 2 commercial channels because it's economically viable. And so if you artificially keep alive all those little media, perhaps it doesn't contribute to the quality, because if you have more money, the more quality you can demand from the paper. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we have to, the mic is still on. We have to finish here, so in the end, I promised, well, short and 30 minutes, I suggest 20 minutes for each of the participants with one specific question. What's seconds, of course, yes. What is the single most important measure that you would like this conference to recommend in its conclusions to change the situation, without comments, without going deep into it? Just one important thing that you want to be part of the results. Thank you. You may start.
Thank you. I hope my concluding words will be somehow respond to my colleague from Armenia about whether Russian propaganda is the main challenge. The rest of the challenges are discussed and solutions are found during many years before. But this is something new which affects all components of media development. That is why whatever component we consider and find solutions, we have to take into account this new challenge.
Thank you. Oksana, please.
I believe we should join forces and coordinate our efforts. Second, we should promote education. We should develop infrastructure. I mean, not only internet communication, but also mobile internet. During the recent researches, the majority, more and more people are using their mobile smartphones to read the news, and this is a problem, for instance, in Ukrainian eastern and southern regions. We should promote reforms in public service broadcasting. We should promote citizen journalism and self-regulation, of course, and non-profit journalism. And finally, as for traditional media, what I see, they are trying to compete with social networks right now, but they should focus on fact-checking, on journalism standards, and by doing this they should differ from social networks. As for social networks and digital journalism, they should pay more attention maybe to the way they produce information in a kind of funny way, you know, 1 minute video of what actually happened.
Thank you.
And all this stuff.
Thank you, Oksana. It's more than one measure, but all good. Tatiana, please, very briefly.
I have just one very practical and very low-cost idea applicable right now to close the gap between social media and mass media. Mass media could start inform about the content in social media in much more, on many more pages, in many more hours of broadcast time. And I don't mean viral videos, I don't mean some sensations about celebrities. I mean a serious digest of news or ideas from Facebook by countries, by languages, by topics. And I can even imagine a special magazine, printed magazine about it.
Thank you. And Eto, the final word.
Bringing people together, I really hope that we will be a network from this conference on, because we don't have to gather once a year. We can gather ad hoc basis in Facebook, in internet, in order to discuss all these important topics further.
Thank you very much. Now, we've done all we could to discuss the issue of the panel. Thank you very much to the panelists, and now I'd like to give the word to the floor to our chair, Mr. Edward Stipres. Edward, please.
Thank you, Viktor. Just the housekeeping information. So we should restart not 11:45, but 11:50, some 5 minutes more to drink coffee. But just remember also for the forthcoming sessions, more we speak, less we drink coffee. And then, if I may, since there was one question which wasn't probably answered, and I hope I have a partial answer to that, and this was on why media outlets sometimes do accept willingly or uncritically some opinions or narratives coming from Russia. And sometimes there is a very practical explanation. I mean, across the countries of the Eastern Partnership and also in the part of the European Union, Russian language is a lingua franca. This is an asset, obviously, but this is also the curse, because for a generation of those above 30 years of age, this is probably the language that they master the best. And if this kind of the asset, this advantage, is coupled with the absence of knowledge of other major international languages, it hooks you onto information which is disseminated in Russian, for obvious reasons. And this is not only a problem if we speak about the Eastern Partnership, but it's also a problem in the Western Europe or in the West generally, because many very respectable media outlets, they place their correspondent points in Russia, in Moscow, for obvious reasons, covering the whole of the region of, one could say, the former Soviet Union. And whether you like it or not, first of all, again, the language in which those journalists, they are obtaining their information mostly is Russian. And then, at least in diplomatic sources, in the diplomatic circles, we have this notion of going native. If you are for too long on one post in one country, you are gradually starting to take on the viewpoints of the local population. You're blending in sometimes too much. So it's why usually diplomats, they are moving around, not staying for too long in one country. So it also means that some very respectable media outlets in the West, they are gradually taking on Russian viewpoints on various events in the world generally, but specifically in the region. And another thing is, which is also speaking about the smaller media outlets in most of the countries of the Eastern Partnership, but also, for example, I can say from my own experience following what's going on here in Latvia, they cannot afford to subscribe to a high-quality newswire. What they are taking what is free of charge, and we know that Russia is providing free of charge access to its newswire. So, for practical reasons, Russian narrative is getting in our media sphere. So, again, thank you very much. Thank you very much to the panelists, to our moderator, and I see you back in 15 minutes.